Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Cloud Conversations, the podcast stroke YouTube show that you may not know that you need, but you definitely do. I'm Peter Rising. It's great to be back with my very, very dear friend, Azure McFarlane. Azure, I feel like we've not talked in a while. How are you?
I know. I'm doing well. How are you? See, I got up early for you and everything. Look, it's still dark outside here. It's getting a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah.
late.
As we
I'm so
record this,
excited.
it's just after midday in the UK here, so you'll be about 5 hours behind. I
Yeah,
think so. About what was it, seven a.m. something like
just
that.
after 7 here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Phew, my maths is okay. I didn't mess up. This is great. So as you're in a new space as well. I've never seen you in this location before. You've
I
got so much
am.
space. It's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, for those who aren't watching on YouTube or Spotify, I am in my basement. In my basement, I was telling our guest, who will introduce in Peter, that this is my lady lair while my parents are staying with me at least part-time through the week. So it's yeah, it's not too shabby. Not too shabby.
Not too shabby at all. So yeah, Azure, you have invited our wonderful guest today. So I'll hand over to you to introduce him to our audience.
Yes, I feel like this guest needs no introduction. I feel like I'm on David Letterman. But we have Eswar Prakash with us today. Hello,
Hey,
Eswar. How you
Hey,
doing?
hey,
hey
I'm
as
good.
well.
How are you?
Doing fine. Glad we finally got to do this when I finally got the poll results to work out. So Eswar, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where do you work? What you do? Your social security number? Your mother's maiden name?
So my name is Ishwar, and I live and work in Yorkshire in England. If you have ever been to England, this is one of those places where they call what they call as God's own country. I would say, isn't it?
Mm.
It's a beautiful place, and that this is one of my open invitation to anyone who's coming down to England to just come down to Yorkshire. We'll have a nice cup of coffee or tea. Tea, I would say.
Yorkshire tea. Yorkshire tea. It's funny.
Wait, does
Well,
Yorkshire have its own style of tea?
no,
Yes, it's
Yorkshire
called
tea's a
British
thing,
tea, isn't
isn't
it?
it? Tea is big in Yorkshire,
Yeah.
Yorkshire tea.
Yes.
But before we
Ah,
started recording and before you joined us, Azure, we discovered that Ishwar and I pretty much live about an hour apart. He's literally an hour down the road from me, so this is awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
meet
And
up.
we also figured out that we probably worked in the same, maybe not in the same time, but in the same organization before,
We did,
which
we
is
did.
small world, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I've been living and working in Yorkshire for a while. I work in an organization called Resonate. They're based out of London, and they are into unified communications, which is a I think it's a very unique combination where we build low code applications for unified communications platforms. So I thought it's a nice little change from the usual consulting things. And yeah, I've been working with them for about a year now. um
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I am working as a I didn't introduce the position that I'm in. I'm working as technical development lead in the organization.
Mhm.
So I mentor junior Power Platform developers, low-code developers, I would say, and I also I'm also responsible for designing some of the applications. I actually work with other people to design some of the applications. I'm quite new to the unified communications world, so I'm just learning the
Hmm.
ropes there. Lots of acronyms. I don't know if you've
Oh,
ever.
Can
So
you
yeah,
can
it's very interesting. It's very interesting, and I'm hoping to apply some of my technological how to say passions in the work that I'm doing. You know what I mean, AI and machine learning and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm. Can you explain what unified communications are? Because I have no idea. This is a realm that I don't know anything
So
about.
you work with teams, obviously.
mhm.
We chat with teams. We communicate on teams. We have calls with teams. Unified communications is a word to say that it's not just when someone calls you on your phone, it routes through certain how do you call it, a certain
A
it
pathway?
routes you through certain rules, right? So there are certain rules through which it basically ends up in your phone. In an enterprise world, that is much more complicated in the sense that incoming calls could be routed to a specific department, specific
Mhm.
person, and all that, and they are assigned numbers. So the core, the applications that we built basically allow the users to easily manage those routing rules and how should it route, what should be the message that goes back, the waiting, please wait sort of
Mhm.
music as they call it, annoying sometimes, but there are there are rules that we can define as to how the system should respond to incoming calls and how you should route, and that's the whole. That's a very, very, very brief version of what
Mhm.
unified communications is. You layer collaboration on top of that using Teams, then you get a phenomenal, stack of things that we can do with Teams. That's what we are doing. And Microsoft have introduced, I don't know if you've heard about this, Azure Communication Services,
Mhm. Mhm.
which is a stack, which is a managed stack in Azure for unified communications, which is basically something that Teams can hook into. So we are building products around that.
There's so much in this tech ecosystem.
Oh,
All the
really?
time, I learn something new with every guest.
Yeah. So you do Power Platform and UC, right? That's a very unusual blend.
It is, and we pride ourselves in doing that because the apps that we are building, and again, this is the apps, the products are still being built in the background,
Ooh.
but the apps, the exciting apps that we are building are basically going to be a Power Platform stack on top of UCC. So which means that we are going to allow people to manage their their number ranges, their numbers through Power Platform all the way
Wow.
and it automatically assigns things to Teams, etc. So I'm
That's
not
awesome.
supposed to talk a lot about it, but that's what we're doing.
Okay, your secret's safe with us and the how many listeners on this podcast
and yeah, exactly, and
and
YouTube.
Yeah, we've only got
Okay,
658 subscribers currently, so
only. It's fine.
yeah,
It's fine.
sure.
You
Yeah,
know, this is
like
a
and subscribe. Well, was I think.
yeah, for more secrets, follow. Sure. This is really, really cool. So I can see why this could be a really appealing opportunity for you.
Yes,
Can
yes, it is.
you tell us how you got into tech? Do you have a background in tech? Tell us your history.
Yeah, sure. So I was born and brought up in India. If you have ever been to India before, there is a nice little state called Kerala, which is like the southwest part of India. It's one of those places which I mean, they call it Venice of the East because it's a lot of water. We live around water literally. So the great thing about that place is that there's a lot of well, there is a lot of how do you call it? Attraction to knowledge there. Not just I mean, as India as a whole, we are so eager to learn a lot more things. So
Hmm.
computers, I mean, this is 1980s and 1980s and 1990s. Like computers were very, very new. I mean, I don't know if you've looked at the computers at those point of time. They drink a lot of electricity. They are massive machines, and you need a corner dedicated to it with
Mm.
its own voltage stabilizer, if that means. So that's how massive they were. And I first got introduced to computers when I decided that, well, I finished my mathematics degree. I don't know what to do.
Hmm.
I don't want to go into academics yet. I don't want to do more mathematics, if that makes sense. So in the last year, I had to write 7 papers on mathematics. If you have ever done mathematics in uh, any form in your graduation or a post graduation, you know what that actually means. You know what I mean? It's quite intense. I love maths though. That's not saying that I don't love math, but there's a point where you basically go, no, that's enough, right? So I finished my mathematics degree, and I thought, well, where can I apply it? And my dad at that point of time basically, kindly basically said, well, why don't we rent a computer, because we can't own it's quite expensive. It
Right.
was quite expensive then. Why don't we rent a computer? I mean, I started doing this, and obviously as a young person, you are on the first floppy disk. I don't know if you've seen floppy disk before. The first floppy disk we load
Hmm.
is games. right? So we did that. We started with games, and then I decided, well, how do they make it? How do they do that? And I started looking at, I don't know if you've opened up a games application .exe file, as they call it. They used to open, and there is lots of squiggly characters on there. It's like, well, how do they do this, right? So, and then I opened up QBasic. I don't know if you've that was the original basic programming language that came with DOS, Microsoft DOS. I started playing around with it, and I started becoming so much interested in doing things with it that I even started composing music using QBasic, if that is even a thing, right? So I started doing that, and I thought, this is amazing. There's so much of creative application of computing that we can do, right? And I decided, well, I'm going to go further into this. I'm going to do a lot more with this. I would like to do a lot more. Avenues were small because computing, as I said before, it's quite an expensive affair. Only a few organizations had the full-fledged computing thing. Fast forward to 1990s, and suddenly Intel released Microsoft, the chip 8086, I think it's called, the processor, and PC became way more easily accessible at that point of time, and it became powerful. You can write a lot more code in it, a lot more powerful applications in it. That's how I got into it, and I was hooked, right? So I was hooked for like 10, 15 years. I was constantly writing code. The more code I write, the more I enjoyed it. And I finally ended up basically going, well, this is my life. This is going to be my life. But I came from as you can imagine, I came from a pro code background, which means that my code, it's always writing code rather than clicking and dragging and dropping. That makes sense. So that's how I have been, and now I'm continuing with that.
Wow. I feel like I need a book or a mini series on you.
Yeah, this is awesome
This is
stuff.
really interesting. I feel like I got a history lesson at the same time as the background as you. 10 out of 10. Build it.
Yeah, you really took me back there as well in terms of some of those, because my first PC was in the early 90s as well, and I'm thinking back to those floppy drives, and people of later generations probably don't even think why the first drive on your computer now starts with C. What was the A drive and the B drive? We had floppy disks, and then the 3.25-inch big floppy disks, the original ones for the A and the B drive, didn't we? So God, happy days.
And I don't think the newer generation understand the value of the memory space. We used to work on 256 kilobytes. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Kilobytes. Now we have 64 GB RAM, so nothing matters anymore.
It's incredible, isn't it?
When we write programs, when you used to write programs, you have to be so careful to, each byte has to be accounted for. Each. It was very, very important. It was very, very how do you call it? Difficult to basically, you would write a program and you run the program, it will come back and say, DOS will come back and say out of memory. So you need to literally go back and write the code again to make sure that it was phenomenal, I would say. I mean, it's as exciting as Power Platform these days. When citizen developers first encounter Power Platform and things they can do with it. Oh, you can actually write a mobile app without even writing one line of code. That's how exciting it was for us to basically do the kind of coding that we were doing at that point of time.
And in those times as well, there wasn't any internet either. I mean, we were a few years away from dial-up modems coming in and getting very slow connections to this emerging thing called the internet that was very interesting to us all at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was all text. I mean, the internet by itself was text-based. I don't know if you remember this. So you got a dial-up modem, and if your telephone connections are bad, then your experience is bad. So you got your internet is not based on browsers. It's basically on text. So you basically put commands in there to download files. So you cannot download files just like that. And in the middle of it, it'll just cut off, and then you'll have to start again. So there's no resume. So the maximum file size was what, 4 MB at that point of time. That's huge as far as at that time is concerned. But it was an interesting time, I would say.
It was, wasn't it? Well, now we have the internet in our pockets.
Right? Exactly. Like we have a computer, a super. Who thought to put a camera in a phone? I think that would you have a super computer in the palm of your hand.
Absolutely.
It's insane. I mean, my first computer at home, I remember was an MS-DOS word processor,
Yeah.
and using floppy disks, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then I think the next computer that my family had at some point, I remember like maybe 97 or 98, we got like a Windows 95
Mm.
computer. Um, yeah. And I remember
It was.
accidentally
It was.
deleting Windows from my school computer in the fifth grade. I
Yeah.
don't know how I
Yeah.
did it, but
Yeah. It's phenomenal, I would say, because the mobile phone is so powerful right now that you can even run AI applications on it. Like you can literally do image recognition and voice recognition on on your
Mhm.
mobile. I mean, that's how. I mean, 10 years, 20 years, and we are here. So it's such a massive explosion in technological innovations, I would say. Yeah, so I can tell I'm sure we are going to talk about this a bit further, right? I know that this is, can you imagine that is a full blown computer that I have
Oh
in my
yeah,
hand? That's a Raspberry Pi. Yeah,
Raspberry
it
Pi.
can it
Yeah.
can literally run, yeah, it can literally run your Azure applications on it, and you can connect Azure to it, so it's phenomenal.
Well, why don't we segue into that? You have been it's perfect. Why don't you users or listeners, Ishwar just held up a little gadget. Tell us about your gadgets and the things you've been
Yeah.
working on.
Yeah, one of my and again, this is a story. If you don't mind hearing some stories with me,
Of
um,
course.
so when I don't know if you I mean, being from England, I'm sure Peter will agree with this, that we don't find a need for water. I mean, we don't need to. Water for us is so simple, right? So it's
Mm.
it's accessible to us. Well, in a way. I mean, last summer was not great, anyway, but in a way, water is a second thought for us, and it's not something that we have to worry about, if that makes sense. And it's pretty similar in pretty much most of the global north, as we call it, right? So water is water that's a basic amenity as far as we are concerned, and we expect it to be delivered to us, really.
Mm.
But there are times when I've been to India, and I come from I thankfully I come from a part of the world in India where water, again, very similar to England. Water is not something that we need to think about every day. 500 kilometers to the east, you got a place where it's arid. There is
Mm.
no water, as in the rains don't come there. They never fall there. And that and for and f- as a I don't know, maybe as a it's you can call it funny in the sense that in sarcastic way, in the sense that that is the place where we get a lot of our food grains grown. So
Mm.
which means that you got less water but a lot more fertile land. In maybe it was at some point of time a fertile piece of land. Water for them is an extremely important thing. So what I thought was that, well, there are technologies. I mean, Israel has technologies which basically allow water management to be much more efficient for their crop growing. And
Mm.
it's called drip feed irrigation, or drip irrigation, as they call it. There are more versions of drip irrigations that's coming through. The manual process for it is still applied by Indian farmers, as in, they do it's basically using the water to the most efficient level so that your crop can grow. So how you use bonsai as a great example of how you can use, you can grow a tree in a little box. So by
Mhm.
Mm.
by by restricting it, that's how they use drip irrigation in a nutshell, is something like that. The problem, obviously, is that the automated process, which allows water management to be automatically done, is extremely expensive for farmers, especially in the global south. My goal when I started looking at gadgetry and physical computing was to see how I can use, the cheapest of devices to build things with which they can manage water, right?
Mm.
As in measuring the acidity levels, measuring the moisture, measuring the ambient temperature, the soil temperature, and decide how much water should we use,
Mhm.
right? For a particular crop to grow. The problem with that is that we could build it. We could create this. We can have sensors, cheap applications, like the one that I showed you was like 30 pounds, and there is a smaller one for 5 pounds. You get it for 5 pounds, that the computer. So which means that I can deliver the hardware, The problem is the software. As in, what if they want to tweak it slightly? What if they want to change something slightly? You will need to rely on someone who knows computing, who knows writing Python programs and C++ programs to do that, right? Not ideal. So my goal with my little project that I'm doing right now is to see how we can incorporate low code solutions so that a a a less computer literate person can basically change the configuration of these devices, we are talking about young generation in India who actually do a lot of these computing, but they're not well versed in computing, writing programs, right, in C++, and they are quite involved programs. I mean, they're not easy to write. So how do we make it accessible to these people so that they can use drag and drop just like we do, write mobile applications or Power Automate, drag and drop and create these programs which can then use the data that the sensors are collecting to decide on how much water they want to use. That is my end goal. I don't know how far I will reach there, but that is my process. That is where I am, what I'm doing these days.
So is this what you call your Internet of Things?
Yes.
Yeah, so IoT. Okay.
So Internet of Things is not just a how do you call it? It is. So this computer is let's call it, this computer is what they call as the hub of, or in my design this is a hub, which means that this has a lot more power than a little microprocessor, right? But microprocessors are cheap, and you can have tens of units there for a cheap for a less expensive setting. You can have these 5 or 6 of these microprocessors basically with systems with these microprocessors spread out around a field, say a farming field. But the problem is getting the data out of there into this hub, which is a little bit more expensive because it needs Wi-Fi and all that. And in the middle of nowhere, where will you get Wi-Fi, right? So that is where these organizations which do drip feeding, they are quite good at that, in the sense that it's able to collect data and decide on what to do at the little microprocessor level. We cannot afford that because it's quite expensive. So my goal is to figure out how to transmit or relay the data from these little Internet of Things, as you called it nicely, Azure, and then collect it in the hub and then make decisions on top of that. So the hub makes the decisions, and the little slaves at the other end basically implement those decisions, as they call it, spokes, as they call it. They make decisions on top of that.
Okay. This is really cool. When I used to see the like the acronym IoT and Internet of Things, I thought people were really just talking about things on the internet, not that it was an
exactly.
actual
Yeah.
thing.
But
I think this is so cool that you can, like, you're trying to take people who don't really know code and have them do things that code actually does. I have a buddy who's from the UK. He lives in Colorado right now, but he decided over the pandemic that he's not a computer person, but wanted to figure out how to water his plants more efficiently. So did very
yes.
similarly to what you're doing, so he could measure the humidity of
Yeah.
the container it was in, which I thought was really neat. He's like, I just bought some doohickey off the internet for like $30 and started messing around with it, and he was so excited when he got it to work.
Yeah, I think that is the only concern, only problem with IoT, at least at this level, and I'm sure it's going to change with Microsoft investing so much in so many different ways. So what I'm hoping is that, or what I'm seeing is that it's still inaccessible only because of the fact that the amount of knowledge of how to write. I mean, if I were to describe something very simple, like you know you know, presenting an LED light, with a LED display, 7-segment display, as they call it, which counts and all that. Even that requires such an amount of knowledge of how does electricity travel from one end to the other, or how do we make sure that the amount of electricity that's flowing through the LED light is correct. How do you make sure that these 7 segments get the right signal so that it light up. All of this is such an involved process that I'm not not. I'm happy that a lot of people are getting into it, but many people give up because it's such a involved process. If you have not been on it for like 6 or 7 months, you still would be working with it. If that makes sense, you're learning
Sure.
the coding as well as the hardware. So it's a twice the amount of effort that you need. If we can at least take one element of it out, as in the coding element out, and make it easier for people to just wire up things and program with it, that itself is a great thing. But people who are passionate about it, they can basically go deeper into it and write a lot more code, and then work with it. But what of people who simply want to just, oh well, I want to switch on my light when I walk in, right?
Right.
So sort of thing. It's such a simple thing to do, but why would you want them to learn the entirety of Python and C++ to do that?
Mm.
You know what I mean? In which case, low code programming is a phenomenal solution for that. I would argue.
This is all amazing stuff. It's just
Honest,
mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing. I
I
love
agree.
it. Absolutely love it.
So, you have been teaching some of this stuff on YouTube.
Yes.
So, Eswar has a YouTube channel now where he is putting out a series on how to do this kind of thing, which I think is really fascinating. I look forward to seeing the episodes when you bring them out. What do you think is a challenge of making these videos? I know, like, we belong in a group chat together. So for some
Yes.
context, we used to work
Yeah.
together
Yeah.
at HSO last year, and so we have this little group chat that actually has like some people who are former employees as well. Um, but you have some challenges, starting to create content. We have somebody in the group
Yes.
who has a learning and development background, so you're asking for feedback. So what do you think is a really big challenge of being a content creator right now?
Yeah, I think that's that's a phenomenal question because I struggle with it as well. The reason is that although you have these ideas that you want to present, there are so many. There is so many layers to this, right? So for example, physical computing is a fascinating example of that kind of stuff, in the sense there is hardware and all the way down to how electrons move between channels, and how do you control them. So I had to start. I literally, I was not sure, and I think that's where Azure is coming from. And I say, I basically used to basically go, I don't know what to do, what am I supposed to write, what am I supposed to say. And I used to basically have a little discussion, or a rant session with my friends and Azure as well. So the reason is that you have to start from the scratch, the physics of it, and
Hmm.
then move up. If I skip something and I basically say, go and look at that video where they explain it, then the problem happens is that the flow stops. So they're
Sure.
jumping into another section and coming back again. Then by the time they finish there, which would be quite intense, if you like, they come back and say, well, actually, I can't be bothered. You see what I mean? So so
Right.
so that I have to somehow present it, but at the same time not drag them into this conversation on physics and chemistry. But that was the biggest challenge for me, as in how much should I cut off from
Sure.
Mm.
choosing what to cut off is for me was the biggest challenge.
Right, because
Oh,
thinking of your target audience, you have people who
Yeah,
are
yeah,
really into the science of, like you're saying,
yeah,
like down to the
yeah,
electron level.
yeah, yeah.
But some folks are really just looking to get into the basics of how can I
Yes,
build
yes.
something. And
mm.
I can
Yeah,
understand how it can be hard to straddle those two realms. Especially when you're talking about something as advanced as you are, right? Because low
yeah,
code
yeah.
comes from somewhere. It comes
Yes,
from
yeah.
code.
Code,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it is phenomenal, and I think I was thinking that as a part of the series I would probably have to introduce them to Python coding as well, and then magically I found something on the internet, and I was just looking for options, and suddenly found this thing called it's called Node-RED. It's a low code platform for IoT, and it was built by IBM
Hmm.
for IoT, which means that at the hardware end, we can still do no code, low code, actually, I would say. And I can create little, just like we would do Power Automate connectors, or, and data sources in Power BI and all that, custom data sources in Power BI, or custom connectors in Power Automate. We can create custom nodes. Because it's called Node-RED, custom nodes, and then
Mm.
allow users to use them. So I had to create one. There was one that I was trying to do to by integrating it or trying to integrate a low code program with Azure, right? Azure Service
Mhm.
Bus. I was unable to do that because there was no code that actually does it well. So I had to write my own. So, and I have released it out to the world as well, so that people can use it. So I continue to innovate on it, and for me it is an absolutely brilliant distraction from after my work. I've done
Mhm.
something, I'm bored, I Netflix, nothing new in Netflix. I just basically sit and do some of these, and it's fascinating to me, and it's amazing.
Oh, amazing. What's the name of your YouTube channel then, Eswar? Can you share that with us?
It's under my name. I'm happy to share. Happy to share it with you. It's just called Ishore, I think. And I've put it on my LinkedIn page as well, Peter. I'm happy
Ah,
to
right.
send you a note.
Fantastic. I'm just trying to look at it now and see what content you've got on there, because it sounds absolutely fascinating. I have to admit. Oh, there we
Yeah, and
go.
we'll link it in the show notes too, so that people can
Yeah,
learn
yeah,
with
yeah.
Ishwar at the same time.
Yeah, here we go. Physical computing with Power Platform. Yeah, awesome. I will definitely. I've clicked the subscribe button. We will share that in the notes for sure.
Thanks, Peter.
Uh,
Thanks,
and,
Peter.
and not a problem, my friend. I'm looking at your Twitter. When you're not, you need to get your YouTube publicized on your Twitter, because I can't see it on there.
Yeah.
So I was maybe looking in the wrong place, but it does say on your Twitter that you are an AI and Azure enthusiast, dev, and a science fiction nerd. So I'm a big
Yes, I am.
sci-fi nerd as well.
Yeah,
So
I
what are
am.
your favorite sort of sci-fi shows and films?
Oh, yeah, there are so many. There are so many. Well, obviously, the obvious one being Star Trek. Yeah, or no,
Yes,
not Star Trek. Sorry, Star Wars.
Star Wars.
How could you make a mistake like that?
No, no,
Well,
I do,
I
I do,
I
I.
like Star Trek and Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. Me too. I have no. I have no. I have no. Uh, I did it once. I did it once with someone else as well, and they were going what? And I was like, no, 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 no. Sorry, it's. I mean,
Such an
I like
inferior
both of them.
pearls.
I would absolutely know. I'm agnostic in terms of those fan bases, and yeah, absolutely. And then. I don't know. Blade Runner is one of my favorite
Mhm.
movies ever. It's such a phenomenal the concepts there, the philosophy, and science fiction. I mean, many people think that science fiction is all about aliens and guns and all that, but I think there is such an
Mm.
underlying philosophical current through all of these science fiction movies, which I quite like to delve into, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Dune is my new favorite. It's
Mm.
it's phenomenal. It's an amazing movie, and stories as well, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so I've grown up with science fiction, and that's how even my segue into artificial intelligence basically came that way.
Mm.
I don't know if I don't know if you ever watched this series. I mean, it was very quaint sort of series called The Giant Robot. I don't know if you've ever watched it.
No, I've not come
That
across that
it's an
one.
it's an animated. It was an animated movie, and the origin was Japan as usual.
Mm.
But it was about this robot basically ending up in on Earth and helping becoming a friend with a little child. I mean, I was like 7, 8 when I was watching that. Right, like God, I wish I could have a robot like that. Right, so that actually opened my minds up to the fact that there is something called robots and robotics and all that. There is another one which was a sort of a science fiction thing. Science fiction themed movie about an alien infesting a computer in somewhere in India, and it's like a ET, if you like, but for with a computer, if that makes sense. So apparently it was a visitor from Andromeda, and it somehow got into a computer as a second subconscious, if consciousness, if that makes sense. And then it's trying to get back to its land, but it can't because it doesn't have the technology. There is no technology there to allow them to do that. So it helps these
What is
children.
this called?
Yeah, exactly. It's called Indradhanush, or rainbow, as they call it. Then so
Okay.
it's trying to inspire these kids to
I want to put
manufacture,
this on my
make
list.
things, make things to go back to its world. So all of these drove this idea into my head that there is a lot more. Um, there's a lot more to science fiction, and it inspires you, and I'm sure lots of kids who are
Mm.
watching the current genre of science fiction are getting inspired into looking at a little bit more deeper into science itself, which for me is what it did to me. As in, it asked me to dig deeper into science and physics and
Ooh,
mathematics and all that. And
okay.
it's yeah.
Peter, what do you like about science fiction? I've heard, I'm going to reserve what I've heard, but what do you like about science fiction?
I mean, growing up, my favorite sci-fi shows or films were predominantly Star Trek and Star Wars. There are a ton of other ones that I've
Yeah,
discovered and loved since then. I mean,
yeah,
more
yeah.
recently, this is a pretty obscure one. You have to be a real sci-fi nerd to maybe know this show, but I've just rewatched a real favorite called Babylon 5. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Oh, I've heard of that. I've heard of that.
And I really
But
love
I've
that
not
show.
watched it yet. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but what I've always, I mean, growing up watching Star Trek, I just saw the appeal of Star Trek as a hopeful future,
Yeah.
of
Mm.
a future where the original Star Trek, in all of its flaws, the '60s Star Trek, some of it hasn't aged well, but the core message of
Mm.
it, when you look at the crew that was on that bridge, I
Mm.
mean, yeah,
Mm.
we had a white man in the captain's chair, Captain Kirk, but around him we had such diversity. We had an Asian guy
Yeah,
Yeah,
driving the ship,
yeah,
Mr. Sulu. We
yeah,
had a Russian navigating. We had the
yeah,
amazing African American Swahili
yeah.
Lieutenant Uhura,
yep.
Yes, yes,
doing all the communications.
yeah,
So it was absolutely brilliant, and it was showing that anybody could do anything. Back in the '60s, that was insane. It was almost a bit too progressive when it first came out, in that the very first
yeah. Agree,
pilots, they had to
agree.
tone it down because God forbid, they actually had a woman as the first officer in the first ever pilot, and the network executives, too far, we're not doing that. So
No, I believe a lot of the they were so progressive, and I remember there was even an LG LGBTQ character in one of
Hmm.
them, I believe.
mm,
So it's quite diverse, and at the same time quite progressive,
mm,
and you can see that when I think back to it, the influence that it had on us, to say that, look, it
mm,
doesn't matter how you look like, as long as you've got that sort of thing in your head, the passion for whatever you're doing, and
mm,
you can actually make good contributions,
yeah,
phenomenal things. And the same with Star Wars as well, is that
mm,
diversity of aliens and all that, and working together, they are trying to save the universe, which is
mm.
fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, agree,
It showed
agree.
that everybody
There's
has a place.
yeah,
Anybody can do
yeah,
anything that they put their mind to,
yeah,
and
yeah.
nobody's excluded. And funny enough, I believe, as you're in the States, you just had Martin Luther King Day a couple of days ago, right? Didn't you have
We
a public
did,
holiday, didn't you?
yes.
And there's a story that I really always enjoy remembering of Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura on the original Star Trek. She sadly passed away
Yeah,
not that
she
long,
Mm,
did last.
mm,
She passed away last
last
year,
year.
right?
I mean, she was
Yeah,
90,
it
I
was
think,
very
but
recent.
what a lady,
Yeah.
though. When she finished
mm,
filming the first series of Star Trek, she wanted to quit because she didn't think she was getting much to do on the
Hmm.
yeah,
show. And then
Yeah.
she
yeah,
met Dr. Martin Luther King, and she told him, "Well, I'm
yeah,
going to," because he said, "Yeah, I'm a fan. I love the show." And she says, "Well, actually, I'm going to
yeah,
quit." And he said, "No, no, 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 Nichelle, you must not quit. You are
yeah,
doing such important. You are being seen. You are showing
yeah,
you're a
yeah,
black woman um, in a position of authority on a ship. You're sending a
mm,
powerful
Yeah.
message." And she went on to inspire Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg
yeah,
saw Nichelle Nichols in that role, and she freaked out when she saw, and she ran to tell her mother. And she said, "Mom, there's a black lady on TV, and she ain't no maid."
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
just wow.
yeah,
Yeah. That
Uh,
representation is so, so, so important. I know some
yeah,
people
yeah.
may not get it, but it really is something. Macy Jemison, the astronaut, when I was, a little kid, I was like, first black woman in
yeah,
space. Just
Mm,
incredible to be like, hey, that could be me. I'm no
yeah.
astronaut. I'm not good enough at math and, I'm short and don't meet the qualifications. But barring all of that, right? Like that it was so cool to see somebody who looks like me in something
yeah,
like you
Mm,
said, not as a maid or, in media today. I know one thing on Black Twitter that's always a huge discussion is when it comes to Black movies, oftentimes Black people are still portrayed we see a lot of like slave movies.
mm,
Um, I'm like, okay, we need some more content that's either that or maybe, like domestic violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, okay, we can do something in between there, which is why, going off topic, but Black Panther was such like a cultural thing
Yeah.
Mm.
for us because it was, oh, it is Black people in a position of power and wealth, and they're living their best lives and, helping to save the universe at the same time instead of relegated to, say a
Yeah.
sidekick.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um,
And I would really recommend Viola Davis as Woman King. I don't know if you've
yes, I
watched
have
that.
Oh
not seen
yeah,
that yet. It's on
I
my
need to watch
Yeah,
that.
list.
it's
On my
it's
list.
phenomenal. It's a
Yeah.
phenomenal movie, and I watched it, and I made it a point to watch it in the theater as a part of as a support to the whole thing. It's a phenomenal movie, and it's not just about the fact that it's about the African culture and the African history, but at the same time it's a woman in the front, fighting against pretty much slavery in some ways. The great thing about that movie is that it's at the same time, it's not just a preachy movie.
Sure.
It's a real action movie. It's an action movie where with a message, if that makes sense. So
Yep.
so for me, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it, and I think a lot more people should watch that.
Okay, you've heard it here first. Ishwar says you got to go watch Woman King. Okay,
Oh,
and maybe get into
completely.
Star Trek. I have a friend of mine in the community whose husband runs a Star Trek podcast, going back to Star Trek.
Oh wow,
And yeah, okay. So I will. His name is Jeff Aiken. He runs the
I follow
Starfleet
him.
Leadership Academy. Yeah, do you? Okay, that's
Oh,
that's
you
my
know
friend
Jeff, do
Giselle's
you?
husband. So sorry, off topic, but Giselle
No,
is
don't worry.
newer into the Power Platform
Yeah.
community, but her husband has been doing this for a while,
Mm.
and so he does this podcast about like leadership
Yeah.
opportunities, and, and
Mm.
and relating how the characters in Star Trek during a certain episode show such and such skills and how to translate them into today. And yeah, I think it's a really cool thing. So that's also a plug for something sci-fi that
Brilliant.
has modern day applications as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So cool.
That's the
So
great thing
cool.
about sci-fi. Yeah.
It certainly is. The other passion that you list on your Twitter, Ishwar, is you say you're a foodie, and we talk a lot about food on this show, don't we? Especially when you and I are on
Right.
Azure,
Oh,
we tend to talk about food a
Yeah.
lot. And can you tell us a bit about that? Do you enjoy
food is
cooking,
life.
and what
well,
type
well,
of food do you
I'm
enjoy?
I'm less of a I'm I'm less of a cook and more of a eater.
A
Like,
connoisseur.
Me too.
uh, well, okay, sorry. I didn't know that obscure French word, but yeah, okay, fine. So, but but I call myself eater rather than connoisseur. That's right. So no, I think the great thing about I've been blessed with someone who's got passion for cooking, right? So
Mm,
my wife cooks phenomenal food, and the great thing about her is that while she cooks a lot of Indian food. She also likes to try fuse things together. For example, she has an amazing way of fusing Korean, some of the Korean
I love
things
Korean
with the
mm,
Indian.
food.
So we have this. Yes, we like tofu, but it has to be tofu in a certain way, right? It has to
Mhm.
be it has to be done in a certain way because we have that Indian palate. We can't get out of it. You see what I mean?
mm,
That needs to be a bit of flavor, that needs to be a bit of salt and spice and all that. But
Mm.
I and she is the one who inspired me. Let's go to Wagamama. It's a I don't know
mm.
if you have Wagamama in the US.
Mm-mm.
It's a Asian, Asian, how do you call it, East
It's a
Asian,
restaurant
cooking,
Wait,
fast
hold
food.
chain,
up,
isn't it?
hold up. Waka
Wagamama.
Waka. Yeah, actually, we. Okay,
It's
Yeah,
summer
you.
brilliant.
2022. Okay, I'm putting
Mm,
this on my list.
Yeah, you if you come to if when you're traveling into the UK, you'll find them everywhere, right? So
Okay,
you
yeah,
should be
there's
able.
one. It looks like about 40 minutes for me that opened
but
about
but
6 months ago.
I
cool.
never used to I didn't try East Asian food before that, and my wife said, well, let's go to Wagamama and see what it is. I mean, it's not like we can cook East Asian food in our we don't know how to do it. That's the point.
Mm,
Yeah.
So the end that. I'm phenomenal. I just loved it. Like, so I'm a vegetarian basically. So my options
Me
are
too.
anyway thinner
Hmm.
than oh great. So but oh, I just enjoyed it. I just enjoyed that food. And we do noodles here, but she infuses a bit of Indianism into that, if that makes sense. So not a lot. It doesn't lose its charm, but at the same time there's a bit of Indian fusion in there. I quite like it, and that is one of the things. And I experiment with all sorts of food as long as it's vegetarian. I don't mind. And I went to an Ethiopian restaurant a few months ago
Hmm.
in Wakefield. Oh, geez, it was a vegan Ethiopian restaurant. I mean, where I mean that's rare, I would say.
Mm.
And they've got this they've got this plate called injera. I don't know if you've ever had Ethiopian food before, and the
Oh.
coffee. We just
Mm.
absolutely enjoyed it. I'm sure we'll go back again over and over again. But
Oh,
that's the
all
kind of
right.
experiments we do. As long as it's a safe vegan option or vegetarian option
Hmm.
for us, we don't mind.
Okay,
So that's
I'm gonna make a personal request, and we need a recipe that your wife has been working on for the show
right.
notes so people
Right.
can
Okay.
make this at home. Because
Right. Okay.
Korean and Indian, this is a fusion that I have not heard before, and I am dying to try it now.
It
So it's
sounds
called
amazing, doesn't it?
we call it, yeah, we call it in India we call it Indo-Chinese, which is sort of like a combination,
Wow.
because we are close in geographically anyway,
Right,
so there's a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
influence between us anyway. So
Mm.
but we call it Indo-Chinese, where we take a signature Indian, well, for example, Manchurian is one of those, signature Chinese dish, and infuse some Indianism into it. People purists basically hate that because
Sure.
I just
Right, because
came to eat
it's the
Chinese. What is this
fusion, right?
sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But
I
it's a different. It's different flavor, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. So
Is it
yeah,
when
I'm
you
sure
refer
we'll.
to Indo-Chinese, is it strictly Chinese food, or is this more Pan-Asian as well?
Yeah,
More
yeah. I
Pan-Asian?
mean,
Okay,
how we collect all of the people around. I mean,
sure.
it's so politically incorrect, but we collect all of them as Chinese. but
Okay, no, that's good to know because I've been to like Indo-Chinese restaurants, but typically there is like it's more Chinese food, right, in
food,
that
yeah,
mix as
exactly,
well. So
exactly.
okay,
But
but it can be
it
a
can be. So
spectrum
for us,
from Pan-Asia. Okay.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I would like to call it Indo-East Asian. So which means that
Indo.
there is a bit of
Mm.
Japanese and and all that coming into this. And yeah, there is also this fast food place here called is it called Itsu or
Itsu, yeah,
something.
that's
Yes,
right.
yes, that's a Korean fast food
Yeah,
place. It not great.
ITSU.
Okay, it's like
Hold
like
on, I'm
comparing.
seeing it now.
I mean, I'm not going against it. I loved the food there, but I wouldn't compare it to the connoisseur version of
Mm.
Sure.
of East Asian food. But
Oh,
it's still
okay.
something that we can
Yeah.
taste. You see what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I like that.
Um, guys, I'm going to have to jump because I've got a work call. But you
sure.
do please feel free to carry on and talk some more if you both have time, because I would love to because I'm enjoying this so much, and I will look forward to chatting some more with you, Ishwar, especially as we're so close together. I'm sure we can
Meet up.
collaborate
Yeah,
more
absolutely.
and talk some more. So I will excuse myself. I'll let you two continue. As Hans Gruber said in Die Hard, work must intrude. Um, and
I actually know this because I watched Die Hard for the first time like
you
last
did. That's
month.
right. That's
I
right. So
did. So proud of
I am
myself.
going to
It
leave the studio and I will look forward to
was good to
consuming the
see you,
rest of the
Peter.
show as a viewer. So, Ishwar,
Yeah.
pleasure to meet you, my friend. I'll leave you in the very, very capable hands of my dear friend Azure. And Azure, great to
I
see
think
you,
I
and
know
we'll
how to
talk
work
soon.
this.
I
Thanks.
think you do.
Bye.
I think you do. So we'll
Thanks.
see you soon. Take care.
See you,
Cheers.
Bye.
Peter. Good to
Cheers.
see you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
Okay, now that he's gone. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. We've got a couple more minutes because I know we're at the top of the
Yeah,
hour.
we
You
do.
have to get
We do.
back to work too.
It's all right. Don't let's not fuss about it. I mean, we can definitely have conversations, Azure, and I
Yeah.
love talking to you anyway. So
I know,
yeah.
I know. I miss you, man. I really do. So, what before we continue, I do want to plug. Um, So going back to IoT enthusiasts, Ishwar is going to, he has submitted a session for DynamicsCon Virtual, which is happening in March. We will put this in the show notes too. So if there's anybody listening and you have no idea what DynamicsCon is, it was originally a
Mm.
Dynamics focused conference. They have a virtual and a live track now, but they started a Power Platform track last year. I was supposed to be presenting and ended up getting COVID and quarantined in the hotel room the whole time. So I never saw anything besides the four walls.
Yeah.
However, the voting is open for the DynamicsCon virtual sessions. So the way that they're working the virtual conference for this year, I think this is it the second year of virtual? I can't remember. But you get
Yeah. Yeah.
5 votes. You get to vote on the sessions that you want. There are a ton. I am absolutely loving the diversity that I've seen on the page for the Power Platform track. You should go vote for Ishwar. He's going to be talking about IoT and Power Platform together. So
Yes. Yes.
I'm very, very, very excited for this
Yes.
too,
Yeah.
combining the things that you
Yeah.
love and a very unique session at that. Given nobody else on there is doing IoT. So I think it has a very strong chance of winning. We'll put the link in the show notes so you can vote.
Thanks, Azure. Yeah, yeah, I will be covering. We talked about water conservation. I'll be covering a lot more details about what was that and how we go about, how we go about getting to the point where, where we decided that how I decided that Power Platform is a great fit for
Mhm.
something like this is where what I'm going to present on. But yeah, absolutely. Please do vote for Azure as well. She's got so few
This wasn't
sessions
about
there.
me. I mean, yes, I do have sessions if you want to vote for me, but this was about you. I appreciate it, right? Friends helping friends. I was
Yeah, yeah.
talking to a session that I'm doing with a joint session with Geet the Steve Asylum. She's been a
Yes,
guest last
yes,
year and a good friend of ours. I was like, we only get 5 votes, but we have so many friends on sessions
yes,
that we
yes,
want
we
to
do.
see. Like, why would they do
Yes, we
this
do.
to us? Only 5 votes.
Yeah, yeah. I was doing my voting, and I was basically going, God, I want to hear all of them.
I
So
know,
basically, I
right?
can't.
Everyone, please check out the Power Platform track. They've got, Dynamics like CE, Business Central, everything else too. But Power Platform just has so much on it right now. And of course, the excitement is that I think you could
Yeah.
submit up to 3 sessions. So
Yes,
you've got
yes,
folks in there who are doing, they've submitted 2 or 3 sessions and they all look phenomenal. Like I'm
yes.
just
They do.
very excited. So voting ends on the 27th, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
that's correct.
So there's still plenty of time. You'll have to register an account, but it takes like 5 seconds, and then you can vote. So then we'll wait to see what happens. But yes,
Yes, absolutely,
vote.
absolutely. Looking
Yeah,
forward to it. Looking forward to presenting on that subject, basically. On what March 23rd? Was it March
yeah,
20?
something
Yeah,
along
something
those
like
lines,
that.
sometime in
Yeah,
March. Yeah,
yeah,
so that's
yeah.
gonna be excellent.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Okay, so
Right.
what is on your fun list for 2023? Right, New Year,
Yes.
same Ishwar. What are some personal goals? What are some things that you want to do this year?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many things that I want to do. I mean, I'm going at it from a God, I have so much to do, what to do first, sort of thing. Not only because of the fact that I don't. Much like you, Azure, I don't, and I'm sure many of our contemporaries in the in the industry, we don't like to sit idle, do we? We
Mm,
want to do something different. We
it's a
want to
problem.
learn. Yeah, it's always been a problem. We can't. And For me, this year, there is an initiative that that that's happening in the world where we are trying to figure out how best to use AI to preserve languages of the
Mm,
world. Rare dialects, rare even if you take Africa or India as an example, although you have political entities or political countries there, there is so much of little nuances in the way, even in one of these countries there will be different dialects of languages, uh, and and unfortunately many of them, the prediction is that many of them will die away because there are not enough people speaking it. And as a part of my initiative, at least one of the goals that I have in my life, is to see if we can push AI into this area where we can allow it to learn and preserve those dialects, so that
Hmm.
in the future, if someone wants to speak it, we can use the help of AI to speak and learn, and it can also listen and translate, that kind of stuff. So I'm quite keen to step into that and do some good research and work on it. And I'm starting with my favorite language, which is Sanskrit, as they call it. It's extremely difficult, extremely tough. It's an ancient language. It's not spoken a
Right.
lot these days,
Right.
but that's a good candidate to preserve, because for the future we want that to be preserved. There is no way. There's so much of knowledge. I mean, when a language dies, it's not just a language that dies. It's the culture, the
Yeah.
traditions, the stories, the history, the legends, all of that die. You see what I mean? So we cannot have that. We want to preserve, and that's one of the big goals I have, and I'm
And
hoping to
this
start
was,
on that.
sorry.
Yeah, go
Continue.
ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and this was part of your thesis for your master's, wasn't it?
Yes, one of the
Yeah.
goals was one of the goals was that, absolutely. But it's tough. I would say it's really
Yeah.
tough. Only because of the fact that human beings preserve. They are. It's so natural to us. I mean, we don't even have to think twice before we say the next word. But a computer, to teach a computer to do that and to understand and listen, and it's so important. And if you've ever read the evolutionary theory, and I'm sure you as a biochemist probably have gone through this in your academics as well. It's the fact that the it's when we started, human beings started, speaking and communicating, is when our progression path became like that. It was like that for a while, and then we basically went there.
Hmm.
And the reason why one of the inflection points is the fact that we are able to communicate. So language is such an important thing, and it is, and it is tough. The reason why it's tough, and the reason why I believe it is tough, is because of the fact that if you were to cut, I'm not saying gruesome things, but if you were to cut open your brain, you'll see that the biggest area, in the neurological sense, the biggest area after self-preservation and the usual thing, the biggest area is dedicated to languages, because it was such an important element of our evolutionary graph, that language gets a lot of space in our brain. uh,
Mm.
and to replicate such a evolutionarily
Complex.
optimized thing
Yeah.
to a
Yeah, sure.
computer, AI is very, very tough. And many researchers, many great scientists are working on solving that problem of,
Hmm.
of languages, and how do we make sure that languages are understood by computer, not just spoken but understood, which is
Understood.
so. Yeah,
Context,
yeah,
nuance, all those
yeah,
things are really
yeah,
hard. I know
yeah,
with like the advent of like ChatGPT,
yes,
which has
yes,
been a really hot topic these days, is
yeah,
there's
yeah,
still bits and pieces that aren't we can't have AI understand context
yeah,
quite yet.
yes, yeah,
Um, there at work, somebody was working with the new kind of like describe a problem in Power Automate and have
yes,
it,
yes,
write something.
yeah,
My
yeah,
director, he was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool," but looking further into it, it's like, "Okay, build me a flow that does X." It
yeah,
gives you kind of like bare bones,
yes,
doesn't
yes.
fill in things for you. So, because people are like, oh no, we're going to be automated out of jobs. And I was like, I think we're still a ways away from that, to be
if you
honest.
if you
Um,
yeah
just
if
because
you were to.
it'll give you basics. Like you can't build anything super robust with even,
Yeah,
like that
no,
little
no.
bit of AI thus far. I mean, I think it's great. I think it'll change the way that people learn.
Yeah.
Like describe a problem and it'll try to help you, but I think
Yeah,
it's still going to be a
if you
while.
look at the DAL-E, which I think Microsoft is releasing as a
Hmm.
part of their new cognitive services things in Azure. By the way, you guys have to check it out in Azure. They've just released it, and it's phenomenal in what you can do with it now. But if you were to look at prompts into pictures thing, I saw one of those places where an artist has created a beautiful image, right? A cartoon animation image of something, and someone is trying to explain that to a computer so that it can replicate it, and they are struggling, and they said they have been struggling so much because it is so nuanced in the sense, for a human being to basically think about something and create something and then describe it. A human being, even if a human being cannot describe it, how in the world can a computer to be accurately represent what is being said? If you're putting a picture of, say, for example, if you go into Sistine Chapel in Rome, look at these
Hmm.
ceilings and look at and try to describe that, right? So is it possible to describe that? So that's where language is.
Ooh,
Yeah, you see what I mean?
yeah.
So that language is such an integral part of human experience, that it has taken so many millions of years, or rather thousand ten, I think, what, millions, I wouldn't call it
A very
millions, but
long time.
yeah, quite a long time. Yeah, yeah. So for us to evolve into these people who can create complicated sounds and words and and structures out of vocal cords, imagine the amount of effort. I mean, throwing a lot of, I appreciate what OpenAI AI is doing, or what Microsoft is doing, what every other organization is trying to do with language, but we are still so much to go. We are still
Yeah,
so much to
no, I
learn. We are
agree.
still so much to understand, before we get to the point of where we can say that the machine can even understand 20% of what we are saying.
Yeah.
So it is an interesting problem, but I don't think we are, in our lifetimes, we're going to see a solution to that, but at least to kick it off, and that's something that I'm quite passionate about, and see if we can do that.
I'm excited for you, man. This sounds like a
Thank you.
great venture for this year. Now, what about something not tech related, a goal that you have this
Right.
year?
Well, I uh, would it yeah, I would tell you what, I'm gonna boast. I am basically I basically
Please do brag.
I
This is where we want everybody to hear the great things that people are doing in the community.
yeah, so I enjoy music quite a lot. I listen to a lot of music, different types of music, different kinds of music, and I had put a stop, or put a pause to that when I got into MSc,
Hmm.
and when I'm not listening to music, but playing instruments, playing musical instruments, and much like you, Azure, I know that you play piano and cello and all that, and I like percussion instruments, so I used to play a lot of instruments, and I used to compose a little bit as well. I had paused that for the last 3 years. I would
Sure.
like to
Yeah.
do some of that as well, if we get
Okay.
some time after all of that.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I have to say that that creative part when you are busy and when you are in school, right? A lot of things do fall by the wayside. And I would even say these days, like my connection to music is I take lessons every other week. And then in the pandemic, we were doing them virtually. Um, but it feels like sometimes it is hard to make that space for that. And it's my New Year's goal. I don't really do like resolutions per se, but I would like to be more involved with music because pre-pandemic I had been doing like the app Meetup. There were a couple of groups where people would just post in this Meetup, in the comments like, "Hey, I'm looking for." I don't know, a trombonist in this, I want to play this piece. And then we'd jam together, every
Mm,
other week or something. And it was
yeah,
working professionals
yeah,
who were like, oh man, I've been in, vet school or, working, 60 hours a week. This is the only way that I have the connection to the music. I'm not that good. And we had to tell each other, it doesn't matter. We're here just to enjoy the music. Doesn't matter what our proficiency level is
yeah,
at that
yeah,
point. So my goal is to do something like that. And even my cello teacher at this point, he was like, "Have you thought about
yeah,
resuming, chamber
yeah,
music or something?" And
yeah,
time commitments, right?
yeah,
is huge, especially since we don't get that much time after,
Yeah,
work, because
yeah.
you still got to take care of household chores and
Yes, yes.
spend time with
Agreed.
yourself and decompress and spend time with
Yeah.
your family. So
Agreed. But at the
yeah.
same time, that is the sad thing about this, is in the sense that, we don't have time, but music is a great way to bring us
It
back
is.
to, from our work back to our life, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's a
I
nice
agree.
bridge to have, I would say. But unfortunately, like you said, time is what stops us from doing that. Yeah, but I do this. I do, wake up, one Sunday, I would say, well, actually, I feel a bit down, let me do something, and I just pick
Hmm.
up my percussion instrument and just playing, even
Yeah,
for 15 or 20 minutes. You just, it pushes your, something clicks in your mind, and
it
you
does.
you know you feel a bit more relaxed and a bit more, comfortable, and that's very good. And I hope you continue doing that, Azure. And I know that,
Thank
I know
you.
at some point
Yeah,
of
you
time we probably
too.
will meet up. You will be playing, I will be playing mridangam, and you can play your cello, and we can jam. You get what I
We
mean?
can, yeah, we can jam. Yeah, I'm even going for that, like you said, the 15 or 20 minutes. And oftentimes, if I start an activity and say, okay,
Hmm.
I'm only going to do 15 minutes, I usually do longer than that. And I think
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
it's just that getting started piece,
yeah, yeah.
that activation energy can be a little high. So I'm trying to lower that barrier of entry. And I think one thing also for the new year, I was talking with our friend Jenna, and yesterday, and just how maybe things are kind of like cyclical in life, because I'm feeling, in winter, it's like a time to reset, a
Yes.
time to slow
Yeah.
down. Like towards the end
Yeah.
of the year, I was very much like, okay, by the time we get to the end of the year, I want my plate to be kind of clean, and then trying to leave space in the new year instead of, hustle and bustle first thing. I turned down a few things, for the first 6 months of the year, and kind of shifted, energies to be like, okay, I want to put some focus here, want to leave some more room for myself. Because like you said, it's hard for
Yeah.
most people in the tech arena to kind of just slow down and
Yes.
enjoy things.
Yeah.
Last year I kind of did that with the, like first getting into, consulting kind of thing, but this year I feel needs to be more like an active kind of rest instead of a passive. So it's, yeah, leaving more room to do things that I used to. Like I picked up crocheting again, within the past like month or two, and it's like, there are activities that I can do for myself. And I think that's going to be part of this year. It's just like the shift of energy. Like I've done a lot in the
Yeah.
tech space.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
just doing a little bit less there will, give me the space in the room and the honestly like the energy to do
Yeah.
some more things that we enjoy.
I
So
think,
music
yeah, I think
for us.
yeah, music is great. I think one of the things that I've learned is that, well, even in the new year, you're still in the middle of a winter, isn't it? So it's still still
Yeah.
still dark out. You wake
Yep.
up and you see darkness, and you go to bed, you see, so it's like dark everywhere. So we're still getting back into the normalcy of it. If you shift
Hmm.
your goals to start at, like, say, for example, March, then you'll find that things are a bit better, only because of the fact that, the SAD, as they call it, seasonal affective disorder, that basically
Hmm.
dies down. There's a lot more sun, a lot more heat, and you probably go, well, actually, this is a new start, so let me start. So
Yeah.
spring is probably a good
It's
place to basically go,
cyclical,
well.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Renewal. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm a fan. I'm leaning into this. I was like, I don't know if this is a crock full of crap, but like this is, and John was like, you know what? There might be some theory to this. Um, so yeah, I was like, winter is a little bit slowing down. I've started running again, so like that's my usual, at least pre-pandemic. I was like an all weather, all season kind of runner, and it actually it helps. Like I don't feel like I've actually been affected as much by seasonal affective disorder this year, which is really
Yeah,
nice.
good, which is good.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, trying to make a goal of like being out of the house, like, working from home. I know we're all home, or at least for the most part. Some people I know are still, going a few days into the office. But at least where like I live, I live like 30 minutes outside of Washington, D.C.,
yeah.
and my boyfriend Mitch, he lives like even closer. We'll pick a night. There's an Instagram account that I follow that's like DC centered
Right,
activities by just like a
right.
like a young woman who's just like, here are all the activities that are happening, and we'll pick like one thing. So um couple of weeks ago, we went to the botanical gardens. So it's an indoor
Right.
kind of greenhouse, and even though it's winter, they
Right.
had a special display of
Hmm.
all like there's an artist that's been commissioned to make buildings models of the like famous buildings in the city out of plants, and so we just like
Right.
went and did
That's
that, and that
interesting.
was an easy, and it was free to get in, right? I
Yeah.
feel very
Yeah. Yeah.
fortunate to live in this area where we have a lot of free entertainment. So we went and walked around and saw like a big model of the White House made out of like bamboo and honey, and things are just kind of cool. So yeah, getting out once a week. That's the getting out once a week. Exercise, music. I think those are the I
I
think that's
think
what
so.
I'm gonna
I
try and
think
do.
so. My mind basically works well when that space of music just, I remember when I was doing my thesis work, and you get bogged down by details, and
Hmm.
and research and literature and all that kind of stuff, and you'll have, and I just, the moment I open up the Spotify and just play some Mozart or Indian classical, or I know I enjoy Vivaldi's Four Seasons, so I basically just put it on, switch it on, and then your mind basically just goes into a zone where your creativity just pops up quite nicely.
Hmm.
So for me, music basically calms me down. So
Yeah.
that's why I said, yeah, especially cello. Cello is very involving, isn't it? It's not just sitting there and playing on a keyboard. Instead, you've got to swing with it, and that's how you play cello. So
Yeah, I've been working on the same Elgar piece for about a year now, and it's
right.
not getting any easier. But then again, when you don't practice as often as you should, that's probably why. I will get there. Okay, well, we have been talking for an hour 10. I feel like
We did.
this time with guests goes by so quickly, but I want you to get started or resume your workday. I still have a while before I have to work. I might go for a walk. But before we sign off, how can people connect with you online?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, and obviously, I will send you Azure my details, but I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. I do occasionally go into Facebook, but I'm not doing that anymore.
Ah,
But the best way to connect with me is through Twitter and LinkedIn, and on obviously my YouTube channel as well.
okay, awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was great to see you. It's wonderful to have an hour with you out of your busy day. And for all our listeners, thanks for joining us today. And we will see you very soon. Take care.
Cheers, cheers, bye, bye.
Bye.